Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Ashtatari Shatarine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Asyatyadi Shatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Vasari Gaura Bhattacharya
Krishna, everyone. So we're just going to continue with some more kirtan before we give the class. So at this point, we just want to encourage everyone to please chant along. You know, the chanting is for our purification. We are here to help you all, to guide you all in this process. Chanting of the holy name is what we call the Yuga Dharma, or the process for this age of Kali. So we're here to try to propagate and encourage you all. You know, this is why we want you all a little closer. So if you feel encouraged, we can come a little closer again, so we can be more involved in the kirtan. And I look forward to hearing each and one of your voices. Hare
Hare Krishna, everyone. Sitaram. Thank you all thank everyone for having us here tonight, and thank you all for being here. We just had kirtan by our own Umapati Das, and now we'll hear a little from His Grace Shanta Vigraha Das. Shanta Vigraha Das is by trade, by profession, he was a teacher. He is the head of the ISKCON National Board in Trinidad and Tobago, and he spoke last time he was here as well. Given that coming this week is Ram Navami, the appearance of Lord Ram on this planet, I think he intends to speak on that topic a little bit. I might be wrong, but I'll pass you on to him now.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swakadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostuti Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Vanchakalpatarubhasya Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thursday is the appearance of Lord Ram, so I thought I would speak something from Ramayana. One thing I'm always amazed by is the influence that the Ramayana has, not only in Trinidad, but all over the world. The Ramayana itself has influence in a lot of the cultures in places like Bali. Even I heard the story, one of our devotees went for missionary work in Ethiopia, and this was during the 70s maybe, and he met the Emperor of Ethiopia at that time, Haile Selassie. And he was having some interaction with him. And when they began discussing, right, Haile Selassie very calmly said, "We are familiar with all these things." And he said, "We are Kushites." And that's one of the tribes like in Africa. And he actually said that we are descendants of the son of Lord Ram. The two sons of Lord Ram were Lava and Kush. And at different times, then culture would have spread out of India. And the place where Kusha had established his kingdom was called Kushan, and it was in that area there, and that influence is still there now. So. Then in Trinidad, when our forefathers would have come from Trinidad and Guyana and other places, like the Ramayana, especially the Ram Charitmanas, because most of the indented believers who would have come from India, they would have come from the northern parts of India. Some would have come from Bengal, from Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and especially in the north of India, the Ram Charitmanas is very, very popular. In the south of India, the Ram Charitmanas is not so popular. There's another Ramayana that is popular by a sage known as Kamba Muni, Kamba Ramayana. And there's actually many different retellings of the Ramayana. Those are the three most prominent ones. The original one is by Valmiki Muni, and this was retold by Tulsidas Ji 600 years ago. That was the timeline of Tulsidas. Maybe like, he was a contemporary of Surdas, which was a little bit after the six Goswamis of India. So maybe about 500 years ago, like Ram Charitmanas. The Ram Charitmanas came with our forefathers when they were resettled here in Trinidad. And it became such a part of our culture, of our heritage, that, like, and I reflect on this because I grew up like in a Ramayana group. Like my grandfather used to be a part of one temple, and he used to be in the Ramayana group. And when I was forced to go to temple for my grandparents, I just kind of fall in the Ramayana group, because if for no other reason, that oftentimes when they go satsang, they get food after. So that was always a plus, And so I kind of fell into it, as it were. And if you really think about it, right, maybe apart from Christmas and New Year's, maybe, like almost every single day, like in Trinidad and Tobago, in some place, some people will be singing Ramayana. And think about it, you always get some new broadcasts on the radio, like every single night. And that says something about the fundamental nature of the text itself, how much a part of our culture it has become. And I sometimes used to take the Ramayana for granted, with the Ram Charitmanas, or being more, admittedly having a deeper affection for Krishna. We are the Hare Krishna people after all. But I'm always amazed, like when I started to sort of re-enter into the Ramayana, like some years later, like how much it pulls me in, and the depth of meaning and lessons that can be learned. Not just that, but the sweetness of the descriptions given. Like one of my favorite descriptions given of Lord Ram is not in Ramayana actually, but in the Bhagavad Puran. In the 9th canto of the Bhagavad Puran, the pastimes of Ram is retold in about 2 chapters, just hitting on the most essential points. And one of the most beautiful descriptions I've ever read, as a description of the feet of Lord Ram, and just in one line. And Shukadeva Goswami, when he's speaking and describing the feet of Lord Ram, he says that the feet of Lord Ram were so soft. As he was meditating, Lord Ram was going to walk in the forest. And he couldn't think that how the Lord, he would go on this walk in the forest and accept this exile for 14 years. And he spoke this line, that the lotus feet of Lord Ram are so soft that they could not even bear the touch of the goddess of fortune, Sita Devi. Imagine that, such a poetic description. And there's many ways that we could actually understand the Ramayana. One way is just literally, it's just a nice story. So I have a cousin, wasn't very religious or anything like that. And I have several retellings of the Ramayana on my bookshelf, novelized versions, annotated versions. A couple of years ago, I got a verse by verse Valmiki Ramayana with the Sanskrit, the breakup of the verse into words with meanings, and then the translation and commentaries by South Indian acharyas, followers of Ramanujacharya. A very elaborate work. And with this particular one, it's very, very beautiful retelling. There's a devotee by the name of Krishna Dharma from the UK. He retold the Mahabharata in prose and also the Ramayana. And for years, like I was looking for my copy of the Ramayana when some people asked me to give a discourse for Ram Navami. I was looking for it and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I put out and I have this habit, like I lend people things and I forget who I lend. And oftentimes the people who I lend forget who they borrowed it from. So I put out, like for 1 or 2 years on stretch, I put out posts on Facebook of a picture of the book cover. Did I inadvertently lend this to somebody, look inside and see if my stamp is on it? Like I have this habit, I stamp my name on my books. I have a stamp I put. And nobody replied. Like a few people would reply, I hope you find it. And for several years. And like one day I just went to hang out with my cousin, who's living right next door. I saw the book on a shelf. And he said he read it about 4 or 5 times. Yeah. He read it about 4 or 5 times and it was practically in champ. The cover had become disheveled and pages had become loose. I just read it over and over and over. Not particularly religious, but it was such a good retelling of the book. And then he borrowed my Mahabharata, but I made sure I took note of that one. But it has, and just as a good book, as a literary masterpiece, whether you look at the poetry of Valmiki, whether you look at the poetry of Tulsidas Ji, one cannot help but be moved by the depth of description that is given. Like it actually has something in it. Like a good book doesn't only just give you information or entertain, but it makes you feel something. Like it pulls you in. Like a good movie, a good song. Like you don't, like there's something called an aesthetic experience. Like when it's something it has a particular type of beauty in it that and the opposite of that is anesthetic. They put you to sleep. Like for surgery or something. But the opposite of that is like, and then, like these people who do nails and estheticians, they bring out something. They bring out something from within that person. So the literature itself is so full of beautiful descriptions that even if one doesn't believe Ram as a person, whether what one believes, it is such a compelling piece of literature that one cannot help but be moved by it. Another level is that if you look at the Ramayana, Mahabharata, different texts, there's a lot of metaphorical meaning we can take from it. I'll describe one of those at the end of today's presentation. But this can represent this, or we can see ourselves in different characters being described, or different tendencies that we might have at different points in our own life. Things that we may be going through, and those characters are analogous of that is taking place in our own life. Additionally, there's a lot of ethical lessons that we can learn from it. What to do, what not to do, how to evaluate choices, how to make a choice that is very difficult, even though we know that in the making of that choice, people may still be hurt. How do we choose when on both sides of the thing, it seems to be people who will be hurt and inconvenienced? And how do we choose? That's like an ethical choice. Like morally it's either right or wrong. But ethically, sometimes you have to choose which is, less wrong, or which is more right, as the case may be in that particular situation. And the choices you have to make in those situations change based on the people who are involved, maybe even your state of mind. The other people may be affected by that choice. It may change. The same decision taken, a couple of years down the road, like you will make a different decision. Based on that. Therefore, in many places there's that study of ethics. How do we evaluate choices? How do we know which is the right choice at this point in time? But ultimately, beyond all that, Ramayana, properly understood,
is when we come to the platform of the soul. That we see it as not a mundane literature. It's not just entertaining. It's not just something that gives us meaning. It's not just something that gives us lessons. It's not just something that helps us evaluate choices. But to just relish that this is the Lord, and look at these activities He performs, and how nice they are. And just to come to that point of relishing. You know, there's this verse in the Bhagavad Puran. Pibanti Bhagavata Atmanaksata. Just drink again and again. You know, the nectarian descriptions of the pastimes of the Lord. In the first, second, third verse of the Bhagavad Puran, it is said, Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavaka. And the Rasika means a person who is expert in experiencing those descriptions that are given in the Bhagavad, in the Ramayana, on the transcendental platform. And it has such a profound effect on that person's consciousness that he loses himself. That the description is sometimes would faint. Just hearing the descriptions of the Lord, so moved by it. And then he would get up and read it again, relish it again, and faint again. You know, it's the nature of the book. And it says, Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavaka. So, within the Ramayana itself, there's many different incidents that take place. The primary story is that Dasharath was the king, the ruling king, most powerful ruler on the planet at that time. He was old, he had many wives, and no sons. No sons. No children, whether daughter or son, just didn't have. And he felt that something was missing in his life. And he sought the advice of his spiritual teacher, Vashishta, and upon that consultation, he was advised that he should do a yajna by the name of Putra Kamesh, a yajna by which he would receive a son if the yajna was performed successfully. But there was a catch. In order to be eligible to perform this yajna called Putra Kameshti, they had to perform another yajna known as Ashwamedha. Ashwamedha means and a horse has to be sacrificed. And that horse, in order to be eligible to perform that sacrifice of this horse, Ashwamedha Yajna, he has to be acclaimed as the ruler by all the other kingdoms. And if they don't agree with him, then they challenge him and they fight, and he has to subjugate them by force. So he went through all that, but luckily there isn't any description of anybody having any issues with him. And he was able to perform the Ashwamedha Yajna, and he thereafter successfully performed the Putra Kameshti Yajna. And a very beautiful description is given of how the four sons were born: Ram, Bharat, Lakshmana, and Shatrugna. And the Balkand mainly describes Vishwamitra coming for Ram and their journey to Mithila and all the different spots they would have stopped on along the way, and culminates in the marriage of Sita and Ram. And then the second book of the Ramayana, also the Ramcharitmanas, is known as Ayodhya-khanda, where Ram comes back to Ayodhya with his wife and he settles down. And everybody loves him. But Dasharath, he begins to see some signs that his time may be close. And what was the first sign he saw? He saw one of his hairs had become gray. He was already 60,000 years old. And there's a very right? Valmiki describes he was 60,000 years old at that time. And he saw he had a gray hair. And he saw some other inauspicious omens. By that By that standard, I must be like 250,000 years old. So he saw this gray hair, and there's a very beautiful description Valmiki gives, that the gray hairs of Dasharatha were caused by the sinful activities of Ravana. That the devotees, knowing that the Lord would appear very soon and put an end to Ravana, wanted to accelerate his appearance. And as Ravana was becoming more powerful and more tyrannical, they caused Dasharatha's hair to become grey. And Dasharatha was very thoughtful, because a very interesting thing, like Valmiki Muni describes, that when he saw this, and he saw other omens taking place, he had some dreams and so on, he consulted with his spiritual advisor, his Guru Vashishta, and he said that, I see this is happening. Ram is becoming trained up. And I want to put things in place that as soon as I leave this world, he becomes king. So the description is that Ram becomes the prince regent. Other descriptions are that he's coronated as king. And he just sits in wait until Dasharatha gives him the full go-ahead. And all this was done, and Vashishta asked Dasharatha, when do you want to do this thing? When do you want to perform this ceremony? And he said, immediately. Tomorrow. Make all preparations, and tomorrow Ram will receive the blessings of myself and all the elders and spiritual personalities within the kingdom, and he would accept the responsibility of the kingdom. And Vashishta asked him, but you want to do that, but Bharat isn't here. Bharat and Shatrugna, they have gone to the kingdom of his mother to spend holidays, as it were. And he said, no, we can't wait. We can't wait. I take this, and this, when you think about it, like Dasharatha, like he saw this gray hair, he saw these signs, and immediately he came to terms with his own mortality. That even though I am king, I can't be king forever. And sometimes it happens where persons hold on to power, they hold on to positions, long past their due date. And what happens oftentimes in organizations where that takes place, sometimes like there's this saying, I don't know if I remember it correctly, in your own story, that you stick around long enough, that you start off as the hero, but you stick around long enough to become the villain. And oftentimes people are forced out of their positions, they are unceremoniously removed, something catches up to them and they have to leave. But Dasharatha was very responsible. He thought, my time is finite. Let me immediately put things in place, even for practical reasons. So when I do pass from this world, there isn't any kind of upheaval. There's a smooth transition from my rulership to the next. So you put things in place. And part of that, because Ram and by extension his brothers would play a key role in managing the kingdom, then they were trained for that from a very young age. So it was not they were just handed a position and then, now you have the position, do whatever the hell you want. No, they were prepared for the role. They were not just thrown into it. Like, sometimes, people learn to swim. They just throw them in the water and they will swim. And surprisingly, a lot of people learn to swim like that. But it wasn't like that. Like the managing of a kingdom, taking care of people, making sure everything was running smoothly, the relationship with other kingdoms. Like a person who would take up that responsibility, a lot of training and investment had to go into that person. So Dasharatha, he was investing in his sons from the very beginning. When this news came, like you can imagine that the whole of Ayodhya was up in celebration. Dasharatha was in his chambers and he was very sober. He was meditating on what he was about to do. this ceremony was supposed to be taking place accompanied by the recitation of Vedic mantras and so many things. And he was very sober and fixed. He told Ram what was going to happen. Ram was also sober and meditative on his responsibility that was being entrusted into him the following day. And everybody in Ayodhya, they were celebrating like anything, almost as if he was already king. Whole of Ayodhya was, like beyond themselves with happiness that Ram was going to become king. There was one person, she was standing on one of the balconies of one of the palaces in Ayodhya, and she was seeing what was going on. When the news came to her, she was completely upset. She couldn't bear this news. And that was a lady by the name of Manthara. And who was Manthara? Manthara was the chief maidservant or the handmaiden of Dasharatha's favorite queen, Kaikeyi. And it's quite interesting. And there's a lot of lessons we can learn from that. And the descriptions that Valmiki gives, like in the Ramayana, and also Tulsidas by extension, of that conversation between Manthara and Kaikeyi is such a beautiful thing. And I can imagine when, if I remember correctly, like when I was growing up, like on a Saturday evening, they would have the Ramayana serial that was going on, like in the afternoons. And on Sunday, like 6 o'clock, they have Mahabharata on TV, Ramayana Saga. And you can imagine, and they really dramatize this thing, like, when something happens, like, you see the camera will shift to one person and they'll show a close-up to zoom into the face, and will shift to the other person and zoom into the face. Then Manthara would have gone in and give the news to Kaikeyi that, didn't you hear what is going to happen? That Ram is going to become king. And one could imagine how the camera would have zoomed in on Kaikeyi with the reaction. And Kaikeyi, this is such great news. Why are you saying Kaushalya's son? And one of the terms that Manthara used was Kaushalya's son is going to be crowned king. And Kaikeyi, when she heard that news, she said, why are you saying Kaushalya's son? He's also my son. And he's going to become king. And in great happiness, she took off her necklace that she was wearing and gave it to Manthara. And Manthara said, you foolish girl. So much beauty, but very little brain. And she threw the necklace onto the floor with such force that all the fine filigree that was on it shattered from the necklace and it just fell apart on the floor. And she started to work on Kaikeyi. Because Manthara, she was a hunchback. She wasn't especially beautiful. When she was younger, she would be made fun of. One of the persons who actually made fun of her was Ram. Now, there's a story I heard that Ram and his brothers were playing and they were making mud balls. And they saw Manthara in some distance. And Ram formed a mud ball over one arrow and he strung it to his bow and shot it in such a way that it hit Manthara's hump and shattered, and the arrow deflected, so she wasn't pierced by the arrow. He was a young boy, he was playing, and everybody laughed when they saw this. But Manthara didn't take it so lightly. Like she felt deeply, so she carried this for like almost 20 years practically from when the incident happened. And bearing all this, she went to Kaikeyi and said, you should know that Bharat should be king. Bharat should be king. But you are so foolish, you don't realize the plan, the nefarious plot that is afoot. Why do you think that Dasharatha has made this pronouncement when Bharat isn't here? That you have been enjoying the position of being the favorite wife of Dasharatha for so many years. And all this would come to an end. Kaushalya will now become the favorite one because the kingdom goes to her son. And Kaushalya, will now be the source of your abuse. And in the course of time, when Ram cements his position as king, the next person on the list is Bharat. And she began to feed this, and the proper word to use is disinformation. And sometimes you hear terms being used, misinformation, disinformation. There's another one, malinformation. You ever heard these terms before? Anybody knows what these terms mean? The difference, do they mean the same thing? Disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. I'll tell you quite honestly, I only learned this term when I was researching for this a few years ago. So, misinformation is somebody shares something. There's no ill intent behind it. Like, for example, somebody sees some health advice and they just share it. And then it turns out it's not true. They didn't do it with the intention to harm anybody. They just didn't, dot their I's and cross their T's. They didn't just verify it. It turns out to be wrong and nobody was harmed, right? But disinformation is somebody intentionally spreads information that is false for the purpose of causing unrest. Like a lot of times it happens during political campaigning. In Trinidad, it is often spread under the guise of parliamentary privilege. In Trinidad, people would say anything because then they can't be prosecuted for it, whether for defamation or otherwise. Once you say something in the parliament, you're protected. I mean, one thing that comes to mind there's a book that was written, I can't remember if it was written by a gentleman by the name of Noam Chomsky, some years ago, a political commentator. Didn't start off as a political commentator, was a linguist, and became a political commentator. This happened around when America decided to invade Afghanistan and Iraq and all these things. He wrote a book called Manufacturing Consent. And there was a concerted effort between the government of the United States of America and the media houses in the US to create a campaign to say that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And Saddam Hussein would use it on his own people, and they needed to go in. And they went in, and they left Iraq. After about 20-something years of looking for the weapons of mass destruction and didn't find any. And the whole idea, it turns out after, when they were leaked Pentagon documents and all these things, it was just disinformation. They had to get, in those times, and that was just 20 years ago, you had to get the American population to really buy in to what the government was about to do. And to get government to buy in, then you have to get the people to buy in, then they have to be informed. And so this one, it turned out they had no. And there's other things as well, right? Some more controversial than others, that if you look back in history. And then the other one is malinformation. So mal literally means bad, but malinformation is something that is true. It's information that is true, but you're using it for the purpose of character assassination. It's also a lot of times it takes place in politics. Sometimes a person may have had a private conversation with someone, and it's secretly recorded. And then that person who would have made certain statements, then they somehow, their political stock rises and they may be up for position. And there are people who want to usurp the chances of that person getting that position. So they leak this conversation. It's proper information, but it's not used for good purpose. It's malintent. The use of it is with malintent. And it happens. Oftentimes you see, all of a sudden a person comes into office and some lady comes out and said that she was essayed by that person some years ago, and they manufacture things. So that might be disinformation. If something was privately done, like a person might have had, a case of infidelity in their marriage or something like that, and sometimes that is recorded. And then they use that to blackmail and to do all these things. So that's malinformation. So this case here, Mantara was foisting upon Kaikeyi disinformation. Because the description given by Valmiki Muni and by Tulsidas is it wasn't just a whimsical decision that Dasharatha had made. He saw something, he felt something, and he didn't just act, but he consulted with his advisors. He held court. And they all agreed that this was the right thing to do. And therefore, based on the consensus of his advisors, Dasharatha proceeded to put the plan into effect. And one of the lessons we can take away from this is that when we are presented with information, oftentimes it happens in relationships and friendships, we hear things about people, about what they may have done or what they may not have done, and oftentimes the response is like, so-and-so person did so-and-so, and the response is true, and then you tell someone else, and you tell someone else, and you tell someone else. And then lo and behold, it turns out it is not true. But the damage was already done. And many times, like when something like that takes place, trust is broken and relationships are hurt. It causes a lot of strain even amongst the group that would have taken place in. What I find is that when we hear something, rather than say true, interrogate it. Is it true? Where did you hear this from? Who said that? Did you verify that? Did you get it from another person? So we have to be responsible in the way we receive. Else it just falls to the platform of gossip and it doesn't benefit anyone and in the long run causes hurt. We have that responsibility. And we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And here we see that Kaikeyi, she started off innocently enough. No, Ram is my son. Why are you saying Kaushalya's son? That the other side of that is be careful to whom we give our hearts to, in the sense of who we voluntarily and submissively take information from. We have that responsibility. Kaikeyi became corrupted by the bad influence and the bad association of Mantara. It was almost like the moon of her intelligence became overcome by the Rahu of Mantara's influence. But all good sense was eclipsed in our consciousness. And the whole idea is that Mantara wasn't interested in Kaushal, in Kaikeyi. She wasn't interested in Bharat. She was interested in her own conveniences. Because when she rose to a high position, then her stock of value also rose. Persons couldn't make fun of her in public anymore. She was favored. She could immediately, call her shot from stage. Then she had position. She had influence. And therefore persons couldn't overtly be disrespectful to her anymore. And she saw that when Ram becomes king, then my position may be relegated. Now if you really look at this, right, one is hard pressed to find any iota of truth in that. Because that is not the nature of Ram. That he would treat someone like that, although he did make a prank on her when he was young. But it wasn't that Ram would, mistreat Mantara or kick out or anything like that. So even how she felt was a concoction of her own mind. And she went and put that on Kaikeyi, and Kaikeyi becomes changed. And she tells her, you have to act. You have to act. Else all misfortune would come upon you. And she's really thinking, all misfortune will come upon me. So therefore you should act. And so Kaikeyi went and she entered a special chamber of her palace. And Dasharatha came to give her the news and saw she was in that chamber and she was just disheveled, lying on the ground. And Dasharatha went to give comfort to her. And she said, you remember you made 2 promises to me previously, and there was an incident. She was a very skillful warrior. She was a proper kshatriya as well. And one time Dashrath had fallen in battle, and Kaikeyi skillfully drove a chariot in the midst of the battle that was taking place and rescued Dashrath. Very skillful, not an ordinary lady by any stretch of the imagination. You know, sometimes like it is often depicted, you know, women to be of lesser status in our epics, but when you look at the evidence, there's not enough support for that. Like Draupadi, practically speaking, she was running the entire kingdom of the Pandavas. Even when they became, she was in charge of the treasury. And she actually reveals in one instance she was speaking, I think, to, I can't remember who she was speaking to, it was Kunti or Subhadra in Mahabharata, that if I don't keep track, then they will not know what is happening in this kingdom. Meaning the Pandavas, the Dishra and others. She was responsible for the finances of the kingdom, making sure everything was, the resources were managed properly. And so Kaikeyi, she had that skill, and she rescued Dashrath, and Dashrath was so obliged to her that asked me for 2 benedictions, and she put it in the bank. She banked it. You know, not now, later on. And she forgot about it. But Mantra didn't forget. So now was the time to ask for those benedictions. Now was the time. And what were those benedictions? So she asked Mantra, what should I ask for? Mantra said, you should ask that Ram should be banished from the kingdom. At first, Bharat should become king, and Ram should be exiled from Ayodhya for 14 years. And the significance of 14 is that she thought in 14 years, Bharat would have enough support within the kingdom that nobody would challenge him anymore. And the second part of it is that after 14 years, on one side they would love Bharat so much, and the other side, 14 years was enough time for them to forget about Ram. So even when he came back, oh, Ram? Yeah, alright, how you doing? And it wasn't that he wouldn't create much of an impact. So she thought about this thing very carefully. And so she dropped that on Dashrath, and Dashrath practically was like a thunderbolt hitting him in his head and his heart simultaneously. And then he remembered an incident that took place many years ago. And at that point in time, the history of Shravan Kumar is described, where Dashrath, just by sound, thought he was shooting a deer and killed one boy. And the parents of the boy cursed him that just as we lost our son, you will also lose your son. You will die in separation from your son. Like that. So there's an interesting history that is described in that regard. And the news was given. The news was given. And he called Ram and he told them what would happen. And everybody immediately knew that something was up. Even when Bharat returned. Because what happened in Kaikeyi's mind, being fed by the poison of Mantara, she thought that she was doing this for Bharat. Like, based on what Mantara was telling her, she constructed this idea of Bharat in her own mind and thought that everything she was doing, securing the kingdom for him, making Ram go away so there would be no undue influence that could usurp his authority in the kingdom, she thought 100% that she was doing this for Bharat. When Bharat came, she was like, how can you do this? I have no intention to be the king. And sometimes that happens to us, I think, that we have our idea in our mind what this person would want, whether it be our parents, whether it be our significant others or friends, and we think that, you know, I should do this for them. And it may be a big thing, it may be a small thing, but unless we really have that heart-to-heart connection with somebody, it is highly unlikely we could effectively intuit what that person would really want at that particular time. And the right thing for Kaikeyi to do at any point in time, in the first instance, when she was being fed this thing by Mantara, just go and ask Dasharatha. Mantara is saying, is this true? Ask Vashishta if you didn't trust Dasharatha. Ask Vashishta, ask somebody. This is what I've heard. Is any of this true? These are my concerns. Please lay them to rest. When she thought that what she was doing was for the benefit of Bharat, ask Bharat, this is my intention, this is my suspicion, this is what I think is going to happen. Do you agree with my course of action? Then Bharat himself said, ask. None of that was done. And this was is practically the major turning point in the narration of the Ramayana. This incident that takes place between Kaikeyi and Mantara and the actions that take place thereafter. The rest of the Ramayana unfolds from this incident. And how much inconveniences in our own lives could be avoided if we just take a step back from situations, get someone who don't take things on its face, interrogate it out a bit. Many friendships could be saved, relationships could be saved, person's feelings can be spared as opposed to hurt. Very, very important lessons. And one thing we could do, rather than speak about people, then take some just speak to the person. Rather than speak about them, especially in their absence. Speak to the person, take some time. Because if we uncritically, if we don't sufficiently interrogate information that we receive, especially if the person who's giving it may be a bit dodgy, a bit unscrupulous in themselves, the information may be a bit unscrupulous. If we don't take time to get some verification, then we'll be treading in very dangerous water. Very dangerous water. So the poison of the seeds of doubt and mistrust was sown by Mantara into the fertile heart of Kaikeyi, and it took root and led to the destruction of many relationships in Ayodhya. So, one metaphorical understanding, and this is the last point I make, is that when Kaikeyi becomes poisoned by the disinformation of Mantara, it leads to Ram being banished from Ayodhya. So a metaphorical understanding is that Ayodhya is like our heart, Mantara is our mind, and Kaikeyi is us. So when we allow the mind to poison us without higher understanding or seeking a more complete understanding in particular situations, the result is Ram becomes banished from our hearts. So with that I'll stop. If anybody would like to ask any question, to make any correction, I may have said something that I did wrong, to ask a question, to add something, to share something that would have resonated with you, not necessarily in this presentation, but otherwise, something that makes you think of. And now's the time. We have a mic. If you try to use the mic, then you just speak loudly. It's a small room. So let me ask you, does it make sense? I mean, does it sound reasonable? And if I ask myself, I find it sound reasonable. So this is Ram Navami, and we can meditate on these things. And there's a wealth of discourses we can find on the Ramayana by many different people that share this type of lessons. There's many retellings of the Ramayana that you can find. I personally find it a very inspirational book, not just for spiritual practice or meditation, just for how to approach different situations that one would encounter. I find it a very useful guidebook as it were. So with that, we'll start. Ramachandra Bhagavan ki jai, Shri Sita Ram Lakshmana Hanuman ji ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. So we'll continue with the more kirtan.
So we just have I know we're coming on to the end of our time, so we're just trying to have a short kirtan, short and sweet, hopefully. And afterwards, we also have some books on the side there, if you all would like to take a look at them, some books and some magazines that we have. So we'll have someone by the table afterwards. You could always come and you could just, I don't think, we're not charging for them, we give them out. So if you're interested, you could come and check us out.
But feel free to accept that book on the occasion of your appearance of the
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.